Good morning, Vietnam. I think it's Vietnam. Doesn't really matter. But what's going on, guys? I am Follygon. I got my yummy Earl Grey tea, and we are ready to start our stream today. We are going to be doing some hard surface work in ZBrush today, using the ZModeler brush. We tried to do that a little bit yesterday during our stream, but if you tuned in, we ended up spending more of our time in Blender playing around with some physics by the end of it. So we did some stuff to create these track pieces using the ZModeler brush in ZBrush, and then from there we popped them into Blender and started playing around with physics, trying to make like a little marble racetrack or what have you. But yeah, like I said, most of that time was spent in here in Blender trying to fix the physics, and a lot of you guys helped me out trying to figure out that stuff. So that was a lot of fun. But today, because we ended up spending so much time in here, I wanted to spend some more time actually in ZBrush, focusing on the ZModeler brush and some other tools as well, to create something a little bit more complex. I found this little kind of old school alarm clock on the internets, and I thought it would be fun if we went through and made that. In terms of my Android 17 character, real quick, I'll show you the render scene that I've been working on. This is just a quick little render scene in Blender. Let me lower the samples here, and hopefully our stream doesn't crash. But yeah, pretty simple scene. It's the 3-point lighting setup that I showed off the other day. Let me toggle that off so we can actually see the lights. If it will load, there we go, cool. So it's just a really simple kind of studio lighting setup, 3-point lights, 3-point lighting setup, you know, key, fill, and a pretty strong rim light, and you can kind of see the preview there. I've done some, I think I did like 3 or 4, I think I did 3 render passes to kind of fix the lighting that I'm getting on the ground here, and played around with that. But other than that, I'm still kind of figuring out what I want to do with that final image in compositing. But yeah, that's him. I just wanted to give you guys a quick update so you could see what was going on there. And I think we'll give a little bit more time here for some people to pop in. And we can go ahead and get started on our clock. Let me just go ahead and set up my scene before we do that. My default ZBrush scene always starts here with a little sphere by default. I just have that in my Z startup file. Let's go ahead and start, instead of a sphere, let's go down to initialize and do a 2, 1, 2 Y cylinder. I think that'll make the most sense for our clock here. And then I think I'm just going to rotate this 90 degrees so it's facing us in the X, and I'm holding the Shift key while I do that to make that snap to that 90. I like using my transpose tool, so we'll be using that as well. And welcome everybody. If you're just joining us for the first time, I'm Follygon, and today we are doing a live tutorial going through making a little old school alarm clock here. It's kind of like obviously this is a newer clock made to look like the that older style of alarm clock, but it looks pretty sweet. And it's a little bit more complex than some of the stuff we did yesterday. If you didn't see that, it's just some of, where'd they go? Just some of these track pieces that I quickly Z-modeled up in ZBrush. I thought we didn't really look at enough functions that it would be worth it, and then we ended up spending more time in here in Blender playing around with the physics. So we ended up missing out on exactly what I wanted to do, which was try to look at the ZModeler brush, which is just BZM, which is the hotkey for that. I have it down here in my custom user interface, so you'll see me clicking down here a lot to pull that up. But yeah, we're gonna look at all the different functions that we can do here. Probably not go through, you know, every single combination possible, but more so kind of tackle them in a way that makes sense, you know, for each function that we need. So I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody. I see some more people popping in here. I say we go ahead and start alarm clocking it. If you do not have the cylinder on your screen like I do, you can take any subtool, any object that you have, come on down into the initialize palette, which is at the bottom of the tool menu, and then just set your settings to XYZ 212, and then click on cylinder Y, and that'll set that up for you. And then I just rotated it 90 degrees so that it was facing me in the X-axis. I just prefer to kind of work on this central axis just so I know where I am in the 3D space. All right, let's do it, guys. Let's jump in. Let's grab our ZModeler brush, and the first thing I am going to do is hover that brush over an edge loop. I'm going to hit the X key just to make sure symmetry is off. A quick note about the ZModeler brush and hard surface modeling in ZBrush. You want to be really careful with doing any action that mirrors over to the other side of your object when you're working with anything that might travel across that direction. So for what we're doing here, we're going to hold the space bar over this edge and select Crease, Edge Loop Complete. And because that interaction will make this go all the way around this object, same thing if I was inserting an edge loop, because symmetry is on, that can sometimes cause ZModeler to freak out and crash ZBrush on us. So I'm just going to keep symmetry off if I don't need it. So you're going to notice that while trying to use this function, if you hit the D key, that'll smooth your object for you. Shift D will unsmooth that. It's just a smooth modifier. It's called a dynamic subdivision. It's down here under geometry. If you guys want to play with that and try to figure that out a little bit more. Let's go ahead and undo that. So I'm trying to crease this edge loop up top, but you can see ZBrush is having some trouble understanding the direction we want that edge loop to go. So if I click here, you know, it'll do a pretty good job of getting that edge loop, but for some reason it struggles on this low res geometry. So we can maybe get it to do what we want if we hold spacebar over a face, select Insert Poly Loop, and then click to add that poly loop in there. Now we can try creasing that again. So we got crease edge loop here, crease. It's still not working for us. So what do we need to do? We could try to get some more poly loops in here, and this will try to tell ZBrush, hey, we do want this edge loop to go this direction. But that seems like a lot of clicking and a lot of wasted effort, especially when we don't need all of those poly loops and extra information. So, because there's always a million ways to do everything, what we're going to do is, instead of using the ZModeler to crease our edge loop here, we're going to go into our crease menu under geometry. And all you have to do is click crease, and it will crease those edges for you automatically. The reason it's doing it on these edges in particular and none of these other edges that we see on our object is because the crease tolerance is set to 45. And what that crease tolerance essentially means, you can hold control over any item in ZBrush. It'll give you some more info. But essentially what this 45 is it's the number of degrees that two faces must be over for an edge to receive that crease. So we have a 90-degree turn from this top to that bottom face, therefore it's going to crease that separation. Between these, I don't know how many degrees this is, maybe like 120 or something like that. But yeah, so by default, that'll do that for you. Another quick trick, if you don't want to play around with the crease slider at all, you can just pull it all the way down, and if you click crease, it will obviously crease everything. We don't want that to happen. But what you can do is you can kind of Control-Shift-Click here, invert your selection by Control-Shift-Clicking and dragging. I'm going to turn on double, and that is down in your display properties under Tool Display Double, just so we can see what's going on. And then from there, if you click on crease with it set to 1, or I'm sorry, not to 1, yes, to 1. I'm sorry, I had that inverted. If you could click crease on it this way, it will crease all these outside edges. But we're not going to need to do that since we already got our creases set up, so we are ready to move forward from here. So just a few different ways that we can set up some creases in ZBrush rather quickly, without using the ZModeler brush. Always a million ways to do every little thing in here. All right, so let's go ahead and start getting the some of the more complex forms that we see going on in the base. Let's go ahead and reinsert that poly loop around our middle section. And we can start getting this wider section and then some of these beveled shapes going on here. So depending on how close the poly loop that you insert is to another edge, that will define whether it is creased or not. So because this is within ZBrush's, I don't know exactly what the distance is, but because it's within that range, when I insert this poly loop, it does actually crease it automatically for me. You might want that, you might not want that. In this case, we do want that, but if you don't, all you have to do is hover over it, the edge, and instead of clicking it to crease it, like we did for these edges when we were attempting to crease those, we can just Alt-click it, and that will uncrease the edge loop. So much like when you are in ZBrush and you are sculpting with any of your other brushes, if we have our clay tubes brush and we're sculpting positively, if we hold the Alt key, it will subtractively sculpt on our object. Same is true for pretty much every brush in ZBrush. If we use the trim dynamic brush, right, it will trim our surface, but if we hold Alt, it will kind of trim and pull out our surface. So the Alt key typically is the inverse function for a lot of brushes. This even exists for the smooth brush. By holding Shift, you can smooth, and Shift Alt, you can kind of get this crazy monstrosity of a noise to be applied to your object. At very low settings, you can get some decent noise out of that. But let's go ahead and get back to our hard surface clock here and continue on. I'm just going to reorient myself. All right. You can turn on perspective as well while you're working with this. I like to keep perspective off a lot of the time when I'm doing hard surface modeling, just because it allows me to snap to my orthographic views with the Shift key while I'm moving. If you hold Shift, if you didn't know that, you can just snap to an orthographic view and let go of your move, however you're moving, if you're clicking and dragging on your canvas. But yeah, let's go ahead and continue getting the rest of this shape here. I know we're going pretty slow, but I want to try to cover all my bases and try to make this as informative as I can for people that are new, and maybe give a little bit of some new info for some people that are more experienced. All right, let's continue on. All right, let's go ahead and add in a couple more poly loops here with our ZModeler brush. I'm just going to add in 2. And we'll leave those creased for now, but we will probably change that. And then we're going to use our mask brush. I like to use the mask lasso, so if you hold the Control key, by default the mask pen will be selected for you, and that allows you to draw on your mesh and start masking things. Or if you click and drag off of your canvas, you can do a marquee select. That works very, very well, but I like using the mask lasso brush, which hold Control, click up here under brushes, and find that mask lasso brush. It works pretty similar to a marquee select, except it's a little bit more free-form in the shape that you can make. So we're going to do that, mask off one side, Control click to invert our mask, hit the E key to pull up our Transpose tool or your 3D gizmo. Both will work perfectly fine. I'm going to click that middle vert to snap there, and then with scale I am going to click and drag and pull out this shape. And I can hit the D key if I want to see what this is starting to look like as it is smooth, just so we can get an idea for how far we want to pull out this outer edge. So I'm just going to continue pulling that out, and we'll leave it there for now. Let's go ahead and slide some more edges around and uncrease some edges. So we already know how to uncrease edges. That is Alt plus clicking on our Crease Edge Loop function. We can do that there as well. Actually, we'll leave that one creased. And then with our marquee selection here with our mask lasso, I'm going to mask off that inner edge, invert it by just Control tapping on my canvas. Using my 3D gizmo or transpose line, I'm going to click and drag a line so that I can slide our selection here forward for that edge loop. And it looks to me like that is kind of beveling out a little bit. So I will tap this inner white circle, and that will snap to the center of my selection, whatever I have unmasked. And then I am just going to use the scale function again to click and drag that out a little bit. And I can snap to my front for my orthographic view if I want to figure out exactly where that edge is, and I can start working on that shape there. Now we can go ahead and continue sliding the rest of these edges around, trying to make our shape a little bit more accurate to what I am seeing. We'll just continue to use some of the functions that we've already talked about, using the move function, maybe the scale to bevel that, that outside edge a little bit. And we can continue on here. The next thing that I want to look at is using some extrusion functions with the ZModeler brush. So if you hold space over a polygon, it's pretty loud. Let me turn that down a little bit. Alright. So let's look at some extrusion functions here. If you hold your mouse over a polygon and hold the space bar, wow, fancy. There's a lot of stuff in here. It's a lot to go over. That's why I'm trying to handle it kind of piecemeal style, as we, you know, as we need it, kind of thing here. So spacebar, we got extrude here, and it's just set to our target of a single polygon, so we can click and extrude a polygon. This function exists in most 3D applications, so you should probably be familiar with this if you've ever done any kind of poly modeling before. So what we're going to do instead of the target of a single poly, we will be doing a poly loop, much like when we inserted our edge loop. So now we can click and drag and extrude an entire polygonal loop, just like that. And we can figure out the shape that we are seeing here. And maybe you extruded that a little bit too far, so you could scale that back in, or you know, you could just kind of undo with Control Z and retry it out. Well, bam, awesome. Okay, fantastic. We have done it. All right, let's use some of those functions that we've already looked at, and just, you know, quickly slide some stuff around. Maybe try to get a little bit more accurate to what we're seeing here. Maybe I can scale this in just a tad. Try to get some of that roundness in there. We can even turn on perspective to turn that off. Most of the time I'm just keeping polyframe on so that I can see what's happening with my mesh. It just makes it a little bit easier for me to see my edge flow and really understand what's going on there. Plus, if you don't have it on, when you have dynamic smooth, you cannot see where your actual polygons are, which is what these little orange dots and pins are, if you didn't know. When you activate D to smooth your object, it's not actually adding that subdivision. This is not what the actual geometry looks like. If you can see my little red dot of a cursor snapping to these orange points, that's because that's where the actual polygons are. So if I want to modify the surface here, and I click and drag and try to move that around, it won't let me. What I actually need to do is click and drag on this pin shape here, because that's where the actual polygon is. So, just for reference, if you are confused on that front. All right, let's get a little bit more complex here in our shape, and I'm sure we can come back and, you know, modify any type of proportions that we want to change here. Let's look at our front face here. We'll turn off perspective, grab our ZModeler brush again, and this time instead of a face or an edge, we're going to hover over a point, hold the space bar, select split point, and we are going to click and drag. Oh god, my phone is, apparently it thought I said what's up. Hey Siri, we'll turn off perspective grabbers. No thank you. Alright, not sure what I said, but got that to go off, but let's try that again. So click drag, we're gonna split that point, pull that all the way out to the edge there, and we'll go right about there. That should be fine. Can D to smooth that out, get an idea of what that's looking like. And then from here, we're going to use the extrusion function again. What we could do is we could target a polygroup island, which is what we have here, this purple polygroup island, and we could extrude that in to to start getting that shape that we're seeing for our clock face. So that's one way that we could do that. I want to show you guys another little trick here. If you don't know exactly what target to use, you can just keep it on the default of a single polygon, which is really nice. And then what you can do to make this a little bit easier mentally on you, this is pretty much what I always do because I don't like messing with the targets too often unless it's something that's really complex. You can hold the Alt key and select the faces that you want to modify. So now when I extrude, even though it's a single poly that I'm extruding, that's the target, it will still extrude all of those polygons. And I'm not extruding out, right? I'm clicking and dragging these in. So I know the function is called extrude, but you know, you can do that positively or negatively. So we'll just extrude all those faces in, however you guys want to do that. Go ahead and set that up. And yeah, we got pretty much the base shape of our clock from here. So now we could start creating our clock face. We could start creating some of the more complex shapes like this kind of hex pattern there into the rod, or some of these like little nuts and bolts and all those kinds of things. Really, the clock is our oyster. Where shall we go next? I say we continue with kind of the clock face here, since we just extruded in there. Let's go ahead and do this little central shape. So for this, you know, you can go ahead and continue adjusting your shape of your clock face if you want to extrude directly from that. Typically what I like to do is anywhere there is a material breakup or you know, anything that would be considered a separate object. So I tend to think of this like central piece here as a separate object, that little metal pin that's holding on to the clock arms. So you could do that split just like we did for the clock face, and then you could extrude that out. That's absolutely possible. Or what we could do is we could start getting into some additional subtools, and that's what I would like to do right now. So to do that, we are going to use our Insert Multi-Mesh brush. So if you hit B-I, you will be able to find that IMM primitive brush. Maybe, I'm not seeing it though. Oh, that's because I have my custom IMM primitive brush. That is my bad. So you guys should by default have the IMM primitive brush. You can go ahead and select that. It should just be under BI for IMM primitive. And then if you press the M key, you'll be able to see all the different objects in that Insert Multi-Mesh brush. You might also have a shelf that pops up when you select this if you're using the default UI. What I'm going to select and create is the creased cylinder. Now I have added this to ZBrush myself, so you should still have some other cylinders in here. Let's see. I would maybe recommend using the cylinder no edges, but I'm going to use the creased cylinder that I have in here. And then I'm just going to click and drag on my point there in the middle. And let's make sure that we're snapping to that vertice. And I think if I hold the Shift key, it should keep that snapped to the actual verts there, so that the edge loops are lining up. Alright, so now we have two separate objects, but we're still only working with one subtool. And that's not something that I want to do, so to split this up and make it a little bit more easier on us, I'm going to hit Control Tap on my canvas, Control W, which will polygroup whatever I have masked, and then I'm going to Control Shift click this geometry in the middle. Control Shift click and drag to inverse my selection, and then I'm going to go to Split Hidden. And now I have two separate subtools that I can swap between. Alright, so this is creased up and ready to go for me. That's why I like using this. It's just a lot easier. I'm just going to use our transpose line to adjust the scale and the length here. Let's go a little bit longer here. We want to make sure that it's not poking out. We can maybe look at transparency to to figure that out a little bit better, let's scale this down, grow it. We can maybe make that smooth as well, just so we can proportionally get an idea of what we want to do here. Now, depending on what you're working off of, we're just working off of an image and kind of eyeballing this. You might have some actual, you know, real world measurements that you can sit here and start to measure things out, or some drawings that you can overlay over your ZBrush UI and then actually line things up if you want to work that way. If you do have that ability, absolutely go for it. But we're just kind of trying to do this quick, you know, not super specific, just eyeball it and we'll get close enough. But more so I just want to focus on ZModeler and some of the functions there. By the way, did you see my awesome new, for those that are here quite often, who know about my tea addiction, check out my adorable little squirrel. He is actually my tea steeper. Isn't he fun? Rocking that Earl Grey today. Alright. So let's see, what's next? We gotta get that little spherical top here to our cylinder, and then it looks like it's got like this ringed bottom. So let's do that next. These are all functions that we've already done, so this shouldn't be anything new. So we can insert a poly loop or two here. I'm just gonna go through and insert some of these down here. Because by default the insert poly loop will subdivide, it will go between your two loops here, your two poly loops. Also make sure that symmetry is not on. You can do what I just did, which is put one in the middle here, and just, you know, slowly get to a thinner area that you want to extrude. And then let's use our extrude, what was it? Poly loop, right? We can extrude that out for that basic shape, and then we can do that again and start to get that shape that we're seeing. And we can maybe slide that out to make that a little bit more visible, and we can maybe mess with that. I don't know if that's the exact shape, that's kind of just what I'm visually seeing there, and just so we can add some more complexity to our object. Now, you might come into some issues when you extrude the way that I just did. So I want you guys to, I did this on purpose just so you could see what's going on here. When you extrude an object, it will not snap to the polygons that you have here. So there is actually a thin layer, and I'll use my move brush here to move this out of the way so you can see. There's actually a thin little gap in between there. So to avoid that from happening when you extrude, what you want to do is you want to start with your base extrusion. Whoops. Here, we won't do the poly loop, just so I can do this quickly. So you want to start with your initial extrusion, and then what you want to do is extrude further from there. So if you get into a situation where you need to make that kind of shape, just try to tackle it in a in a way that makes sense going forward, so that you don't end up with those little gaps there. So you can see here that the geometry is actually welded there. That's all correct. So we should be good to move forward from here. Now we can slide that out. And if we want to add some visual complexity here, if we want to bevel some edges or anything like that, that's also possible. But let's hold off on that for a little bit and continue just, shaping up this little middle section. I think I want to go a little bit more thin here on this shape, so that shouldn't be too hard. We can just kind of scale that in and grow it down, just to make that a little bit more small. Felt a little bit big to me. And then for the top piece, what I'm going to use is Spencer. Very nice. What's going on? And thank you for the follow there. So yeah, let's do that like a little end cap, that little spherical top. To do that, we could add in, just a sphere on top of this, but let's do it with the ZModeler brush. Let's look at how we can tackle this. So I'm just going to do the same function that we've been looking at, some extrusion. I'm going to pull this shape up. I'm going to insert some poly loops here. And let's look at scaling this shape and getting rid of that nasty crease. We don't need that. And let's just continue shaping this. So let's slide some things around. Let's see, we'll do something like that, I think. Grab our ZModeler, insert a couple more poly loops here and there, make sure that they're not creased, because we don't want those to be creased. And we can just start scaling these up, trying to get closer to that round shape that we're seeing. Oh, and we will not want our end cap to be creased either, because that's way too tight. So to uncrease that, we'll just ZModeler, whoops, crease, edge loop, get rid of you. So remember, for those end caps, it sometimes has some trouble figuring out which direction you want the edge loop to flow. So I'm gonna just crease edge and do this manually, just so we don't have to worry about the garbage. Shouldn't it be easier to make this in Maya, Max, or any software like that? It could be, it could be. There are definitely some more powerful poly modeling tools in Maya as compared to ZBrush. But I'm a digital sculptor. I work in ZBrush professionally, and yeah, I get a lot of questions about hard surface modeling and the ZModeler brush. Hence why we are using the ZModeler brush today. I'm actually a lot faster at the ZModeler brush and poly modeling in ZBrush than I am in anything else. But yeah, depending on your experience and what you like using, it can absolutely be faster to use something else. But like I said, it can also be slower. Like for me, it would be much slower for me to try this in something else. All comes down to the tool that you like to use. But there are certain functions that just don't exist in ZModeler that you might want to specifically use. What I really like about the ZModeler brush and poly modeling and hard surface modeling in ZBrush is that you have the freedom to use all of your other tools in ZBrush as well. So I can just quickly use my mask tools, all the stuff that I'm used to using all day, every day, right here. Makes it very, very nice and convenient. Alright. Let's get some mascaroonies going on here and try to round this out a little bit better. So we got the basic shape there, that little rounded end cap. I was just trying to make that a little bit nicer. We can maybe get some edge loops in there. If you're having trouble moving some stuff around, what you can do that's really nice, another cool thing that's in ZBrush, you can go into your transform menu, activate symmetry, and I'm going to turn on the Z symmetry. Turn on radial, and I think the radial count of 8 by default should be correct here. Turn on local sim as well. And now I can just click and drag on some of these with my move brush, or any other brush if I want to modify these, and it will work with the radial sim there. So that's pretty nice if I want to do a mask here and maybe slide and pull some of this in just a little bit, and everything else will follow suit. So I love me some radial sim. I just wanted to get a little bit of a nicer curve there. We can turn symmetry off though for now, just to kind of show off some more cool functions here that we can play around with. But I think that's pretty good for the shape that we want. So from here, let's go ahead and do a couple of our hands on our clock face. So to do that, let's go ahead and insert a new object that we can start poly modeling for the hand of our clock. Now, when I like to do this, I like to just duplicate whatever I'm working on, as long as it doesn't have any subdivision levels, so that I can come down into initialize and do a 1 by 1 by 1 cube. And with that cube, we can start working up and creating the shape of our hand here. Let's just shrink this, lengthen it out, And I guess we could do, they're pretty much the same for the long and shorthand. The shorthand is obviously just shorter and a little bit more fat. So I say we do the longhand first, and then we'll do the shorthand after. So I'm going to use masking with poly looping. Let's see, we'll turn that off, or actually we want just X without radial on. So I'm just going to mask off that bottom area, and then I'm going to slide in here, and we'll just start creating the basic shape that we see. Can also start setting up some creases here, but we don't need to do that. Let's grab our ZModeler brush, do an extrusion on a single polygon, pull this out, and start tapering in our shape. Typically when I do stuff like this, I like to get the length first, so something like that. And then what you can do is add in that extra edge loop. So poly loop, and crash ZBrush. So I had symmetry on. This is actually what I warned you guys of earlier during our stream. Because I had symmetry on, that's bright. And I inserted a poly loop. Remember I said ZBrush likes to freak out around some of those functions. It did indeed freak out, and that is the beautiful result that we ended up with. A quick crash, no quick save. So we can go back to where we were earlier when we were working on our little sphere here. So we didn't really miss all too much, so that's good. That's nice. We like to not lose very much. We'll just zoom out, and we will just very quickly create that again. And I'll do this fast. Set up my symmetry again. Whoops. Make sure that once I go to add in that poly loop that I don't have symmetry on. And this is a function that I can actually not get, or not function. This is not a repeatable error or crash that I can get to happen. It seems to be totally random when it does it and when it does not. I'm not sure what exactly causes it. I just know that it involves symmetry and doing any kind of ZModeler option across the symmetrical axis. Alright, so let's continue setting up our little hand here. I'll try to do this again as quick as I can and get us back to where we were. I don't think we really lost too much there. One function I didn't talk about was the QMesh function. I'll show that off here in just a moment. We can look at that. It's pretty similar to an extrusion, except it has some extra functionality with it as well. Let's insert our poly loop. Yeah, we'll do this, and then I'll show you guys another cool way that you can insert poly loops that I like to do. It's a little bit of a cheaty way, but it gets the job done. Whoop, we gotta make sure that we insert a poly loop with the poly loop target so that it goes all the way around. Alright, so obviously this shape doesn't look correct, but once we set up our creases, so I'll run a crease edge loop complete all the way around our edges, and after a smooth, the shape will start getting a little bit closer to what we're going to see in our hand. Obviously we need to do some tapering down here, probably some lengthening as well. And again, we're just kind of eyeballing this. For this edge here, if I wanted this to be a little bit of a tighter transition, I could crease that. The crease looks a little bit too tight to me though. So instead of creasing it, what I'm going to do is run a bevel edge loop. Let that go ahead and do its thing. The bevel always breaks your creases, so we'll have to recrease our edges very quickly. And you can see that we're starting to get a little bit of a nicer transition there between this edge. Now this shape is starting to transition and get this kind of negative swoop in there, so we want to fix that. We also want to crease up here and crease on the bottom. Nope, the bottom is already set up. So what I would like to do is insert that poly loop, and I did that with symmetry on, but we got lucky, we didn't crash. So let me try setting that up real quick here. Ooh, and there we go. There is the crash, right as I quick save. So, like I said, that tends to do it. Symmetry plus a repeatable action across that with the ZModeler brush. What is going on, Small Axe? How you doing, man? I cannot get that little pop-up to go away either lately. For some reason, it is stuck on my ZBrush UI, no matter what preferences I check. So because this keeps happening, I'm going to show you guys an easier way to insert an edge loop, just so I don't have to keep doing it that way. There is a little bit of a quicker way to do it. If you hold Control and Shift, it activates your selection brush, but what I would like to use is the Slice Curve brush. I have this in my pop-up menu that I keep bringing up. And what you can do is hold Control and Shift, click and drag, and that will slice your geometry, or in our terms for right now, throw in an edge loop. So I'm probably going to be doing that moving forward from here as often as I can, just because it's a little bit faster. I don't have to switch some ZModeler brush settings, and it doesn't crash on symmetry. All right, so from here, what were we? We were looking at fixing. Oh, that's fun. It looks like our geometry got a little split here. I'm not sure why. On one of our insert edge loop functions, it looks like we got a little bit of a freak out, which is not what we want. So because we can't go back to where we were because we quick saved and we don't have our undo history, we want to fix this. And this is actually a perfect time for us to look at the QMesh function. So the QMesh function is much like the extrusion. You can click and drag and extrude faces, but with QMesh you can actually click and drag and delete faces as well. You can even hollow out certain areas. So it's pretty cool. It's really powerful, and it has a lot of usability depending on what you're aiming for. So you can use that to delete certain objects. So for here, what I'm actually going to do, because this is so screwed up, the insert poly loop function, I'm guessing that what occurred was under insert poly loop, because we have different poly groups set up, I'm guessing that it kind of freaked out between this purple and blue area and ended up causing that error. So if you want, Control W will polygroup everything on your screen that is masked, if you have something that's masked, or if you have nothing that's masked, it will just polygroup everything that is visible. Alright, so what I'm going to do, just because this is so terrible, way worse than anything we want, I'm just going to select all that and click on Delete Hidden. Yay! Delete Hidden, and then I'm going to bridge the edges here. Just because that was so messed up, I don't want to deal with those terrible edges. So we will very quickly just extrude out our shape again, and this shouldn't take too long at all because that was kind of screwed up to begin with. And I'm going to use some quick functions here to get us back to where we were. And you know what? I guess we could also re-import our reference image. That wouldn't be a bad idea. And if I do anything, I'm trying to... A lot of people ask me about hard surface modeling and Z modeling in ZBrush, so I'm trying to literally explain every single step as best as I can. If there is something that I skip over or do a little bit too quick, just let me know and I will try to explain a little bit better. For instance, this is called the Spotlight tool that I'm importing this image with. I have a tutorial on my YouTube channel for how to use that. You can find a link down below. I don't want to go into it right now though, since we're trying to focus on our hard surface. Junkaroony. Not sure why that thinned out so much, but let's just quickly. I think I had scale selected on accident. All right. Really, this isn't a super complicated shape, but trying to show off a few more functions plus a couple crashes here didn't really help us. All right, let's do a quick few creases, and we will be right back to where we were. Alright, so here is our hand shape shaping up. Let's maybe stretch it a little bit, make it a little bit longer, maybe a little bit more narrow as well. And then right around here, I'm going to click and drag and pull this in. And this is going to help tighten this transitional area, just to get us a little bit closer to what I'm seeing there. And then this actually gets a little bit wider towards the tip of the nose there, so let's kind of pull that out. And to make this shape not transition so sharply, I'm going to add in an edge loop towards the end there, and that will help it retain the information once it starts subdividing and smoothing a little bit better. So instead of trying to transition between this top part to this bottom part when I smooth it, it will now be transitioning just between that blue section there. So that makes it work a little bit nicer once we start smoothing. And I think that shape is looking pretty good. If anything, you know, maybe that's a little bit too long up top, and we can, you know, shrink that down and play with that. But that's the basic hand there. I say we go ahead and scale this down and put it on our actual clock. We can maybe, you know, play with the scale and everything else once we get down there some more. All right, so I'm just gonna use the E key, shrink this down, and maybe even scale up our clock, because our clock is pretty tiny in our scene. So maybe we should do that as well. If you have multiple subtools, I'll show you a quick little trick here so you can scale up everything at once. Let's go ahead and go up to Z plugin under Transpose Master and click on T-Pose Mesh. That'll take all your subtools and put them into one subtool here. Then we can mask off what we want and just click and drag and scale this up. And then we can just go on back to our Z plugin, T-Pose subtools, and that'll cascade all the changes back to our individual subtools, and it took just a second to do that. You can do this with really high resolution stuff as well. I do it with, where is he? I think I closed him. I did it with this guy. That's how I posed this character, was using the Transpose Master. All right, let's get our hand in here, get this scaled up properly. Seagull Rush, what's going on, dude? Welcome back. We're actually doing some hard surface stuff today, unlike yesterday where it turned into a marble physics puzzle. That was pretty fun though. I had a lot of fun playing around with that stuff. But we ended up wasting a lot of time and getting off topic. That's why we're focus mode today, right? We could probably make this a little bit more shallow. Let's do that. Did you end up figuring out the blender collision issue from yesterday? Yes. Yes and no. I ended up getting it to work, but I didn't end up figuring out exactly why. So yesterday we ended up, we did some quick hard surface modeling, and then we ended up doing some physics sims right here in Blender, really simple stuff, just to, do something fun with the hard surface pieces that we created. So what I ended up figuring out was that for rigid body physics to work in Blender, they need to be of a certain size, and I thought they had to be at least a certain large enough size, which is true. If I shrink these down, they don't work. But if I make them larger as well, if I scale all this up, it ends up not working either. So I'm not sure why, but I have it at such a scale right now to where, at least to my knowledge, the speed at which an object travels should not affect, So currently, or the way it was working yesterday, if an object reached a certain speed, it would start clipping through objects. Now it does not matter. Alright, how do I turn off Siri? Because it keeps thinking I'm talking to it. Airplane mode. Siri can't internet with airplane mode on, probably. Alright. So yeah, that's what was going on there with Blender. Not quite figured out, like, I know that it's at a specific scale that the issue occurs. I do not know why at that specific scale that issue occurs. Now another thing that we can do is if we want the little ring for this geometry, so it looks like it's, it's got that black plastic ring around there, so we could actually, attach to this. Because this cylinder is already in position, I'm gonna duplicate it, and I'm gonna repurpose this cylinder. So let's do that. And we already actually have some edge loops in place. So I'll just go ahead and click and drag this here. This does not have to line up perfectly by any means. We just want, something. And then I am going to extrude. Let's turn off symmetry so we don't get another crash here. Let's extrude our poly loop. And then actually what I'm going to do with this extruded poly loop is I am going to delete everything else. I don't need anything else. I just need this shape. And then I can actually merge down, which is just under merge down. Click on OK. And now we have those as two distinct pieces of geometry. They are separate. We could combine them if we wanted to, but for what we need here for our purposes, that works just fine. Alright, so there we go. There is our long hand. And then a little trick here for rotating this around our little central piece to make sure that it stays accurate and concentric. You can actually snap to vertices with your transpose line. So I can snap to that middle vert of that, or I could even snap to my clock. And now when I rotate my hand, I can rotate that all the way around and it will always be in the correct position. Pretty cool, huh? There are also, if you want a specific number of degrees of rotation, there is a trick in ZBrush. There's no easy way to do this other than using the deformation rotate function. But what you have to understand is that this deformation rotate function works off of the world axis. All of these functions work off of the world axis. So you probably don't want to use those unless your pivot point is in the exact center of the world here, which I'm guessing that it is not. Mine is definitely not. So if you hold the shift key with transpose and rotate, it will snap by default to every 22.5 degrees. You can change that under Preferences, Transpose Units, or I'm sorry, maybe just Transpose. Yes, Transpose. So there's this little setting here under Transpose that says Rotation Steps, and it's set to 4, which means that it will take 4 steps between every 90 degrees. If you remember, I said earlier, if you hold Control over anything in ZBrush, it will give you some more information about it. The text here is actually lying, though. I don't know if they updated this. Setting degrees, ZBrush was not pressing Shift and moving. If you set it to 10, yeah. So this is lying. This is incorrect. It says that if you set this number to 10, the transpose line will snap to every 36 degrees of rotation. That is incorrect. It will actually snap to 9 degrees of rotation. The rotation steps is for, it's 90 divided by whatever number you put in here. This says that it's 360 divided by whatever number you put in here. So if I put in 9, it will take 10 steps between every 90 degrees. So let's test it out. If I hold Shift, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Did I say 10? I meant 9. Maybe I did 10. Maybe I didn't count correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, 9. I mathed wrong. I mathed very bad. I put in 9. Shouldn't it be 10? 90. There we go. There's 10. That's what I wanted. Don't question my math skills, all right? All right, let's make a shorthand next. That's going to be really easy. We're just going to duplicate our long hand, and I'm going to hide my top hand. You can click the eye icon, or you can double-click an object, a subtool. All right, let's zoom in here and make a shorthand. So we'll just start off, and we'll just, shrink that down, make them a little bit shorter. And I think, the only other thing I'll do is just make them a little bit fatter. Well, you know what? Let's just make this middle section a little bit more stocky. Just so it's a little bit more visually distinct. And there's you know what? Actually, if anything, we'll make that a little bit fatter. And then we'll make this bottom section not taper quite as much, because that's what it looks like visually to me. And I think that will be visually distinct enough. Let's just see here. I think those are different enough. Should be able to tell. All right, let's see. Maybe we can do a couple of these long hands here for the second. And I'm not sure what this other hand is. Second, minute, hour, and are there does it tell the date as well? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that little guy is. But we can look at that. We can create some more hands. I think instead of creating more hands, since we've already created a few of these, let's look at how we could create these numbers and the little dashes around the outside edge. We could create that with a texture map, obviously, or we could create it with actual geometry. And I would like to look at how we could create that with actual geometry, because we're in here modeling hard surface stuff. Let's continue modeling hard surface stuff. So what I'm going to do, cool trick. How are you doing this again? Shift click. Shift click. The rotation is done by selecting your transpose or 3D gizmo, and while you rotate, hold Shift. And with the 3D gizmo, it's actually showing you the number of steps here. With the 3D gizmo, it will snap to every 5 degrees by default. But if you go into Preferences under the 3D gizmo or Gizmo 3D, you should be able to adjust that as well. We're actually going to use that trick that I just showed to create these little dashes here. So let's go ahead and do what we did before, duplicate our object and initialize a new cube. A Q cube or a cute cube. And we're gonna make a little dasharoonie. Ooh. Turn off Radial Sim there. So we're just gonna scale this down and get it into place. Make it a little bit longer so it's like a little tally mark. And we obviously need it down here. I think our clock is a little deep, so I am going to make it a tad bit more shallow. Let's slide this edge as well. Cool. Alright. So we got our little dash up here. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Scale it down. Sure, we'll say that that looks fine. And we can maybe mess with it after that. So there are some stuff that you can do with arrays to work with this, but I want to use the trick that we just looked at since it's pretty easy to set up. So we need 1, 2, I believe 3 or 4 steps between our transpose line, our snap. So I'm not sure if it, or whoops, what was that set to? That's fine. Would it be 4? Let's grab our transpose line. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, no. So we want 3 rotation steps. So 1, 2, bam, bam. That's what we want. All right, cool. So we can just duplicate this, rotate it, hold that shift key to snap. I'm gonna merge these down. And then I'm going to duplicate again, rotate with that snap option, and voila! We can just keep doing this all day. Get our little tally marks. And let's make sure we're not duplicating any. Pretty cool, pretty easy, pretty fast. And now we need the little tally marks as well. So let's go ahead and just grab this guy again. And we will make him much smaller. Just for scale reference here. Looks good. We'll do that, I think. And what do we got here? Are these 1, 2, there's 4 in between each large one. So that's 4, 8, 16, 17, 18, 19. I think 19 steps. Let's see if that's right. So holding that shift key, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. There should be 4 in between there. Oh, nope, that's definitely not what we want. That starts getting off the rotation there. So hold on, there's 5, 10, 15. Is it 15 then? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. I think that is correct. That is what we want. All right, so we're just going to do the same thing that we did before. Easy enough. Now we have actual geometry here. Another, so I know we're looking at this with a lot of poly modeling stuff and a lot of these little cool tricks that I'm showing off in ZBrush that I don't think a lot of people actually know about. This is just stuff that I've discovered and played with over a very long period of time. And what's great about this, what I like about it, is that it makes it really easy for you to set up materials later on if you do this geometrically. So if you want to do like a quick render in, let's say, Keyshot or Blender Mile, whatever, you can just apply your individual black plastic material to each of these dots. You just go, and you don't have to worry about setting up a texture map for the clock face or anything like that. And this is very, very low poly here. If this is something that you were worried about poly count, then maybe you'd want to go the texture map route. But really, we're talking about like 200 polys. That's you're not like breaking anybody's budget probably with that. I wouldn't think. You aren't breaking the bank here. All right, there we go. We got our little dots there for our clock face. Beautiful. Drago, what's going on, man? You did it with a transpose line that got you wondering. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Maybe, did I not, is it not the shift, click and drag thing? Is that not what you're talking about? Did I do something else? Let me know. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Because it's illegal. Very nice. Welcome. I don't know why my stream always brings in all the pun masters, but it's just how it works here. All right. It's actually kind of hard to drink this tea because this giant squirrel tail is in the way. So let's move him. My tea has already gone cold. So. All right, we have now set up our clock face, two of our clock hands, which we can slide around here. Oh, look, we can even get it to, depending on how we want it to snap, if we want to make it do that on a specific point, we can do that as well. What I'm going to do, though, is just slide this down. Is that what you're talking about, Seagull Rush? How I'm able to slide that perfectly? If you're wondering about that, you can snap to a flat with your transpose line, or you can snap to a normal, I should say. So I just click on the clock face with my transpose line, and it is perfectly perpendicular to that face. Same there, you can see that it's perfectly perpendicular to that. If I do it on a rounded surface, it will just snap to the normal that I click. So it works better on flats, for sure. Lamentio, hard surface tut. Yes, that's right. That's right. I see. Many people have been asking about this, so I give the people what they ask for. We're taking a quick 2-minute to finish off our cold tea. Or we were taking a quick 2-minute. All right, so what's next, guys? We have now done our clock face. If you would like your dynamic subdivs to look a little bit more smooth, you can come in here and maybe up the resolution. I could say like 5. So now when I press the D key, that looks a little bit more neat, a little bit more smooth. So this is showing us what our geometry would look like if we had 5 subdivision levels. If I click apply, that will actually apply those 5 subdivision levels to the geometry. I don't want to do that though. We just want to pre-visualize this. If we get to a point where we start adding subdivision levels to a thing, we can no longer use our ZModeler brush because ZModeler only works with geometry that does not have subdivs. So I say we create our little, or you know what, let's do our numbers real quick. We'll do our numbers real fast and then we can do our little leggies. All right, so the numbers. How are we gonna create some numbers? Well, there is a great new feature that was introduced in ZBrush. I think it was in 4R8P2. Can't remember off the top of my head. It's not important, but what it'll allow you to do, I don't actually think I need to duplicate anything here. It is in your Z plugin menu. I have that conveniently located over here under, let's see, it is the text 3D that we want to activate. We want to choose a font. Maybe we can grab some Comic Sans or something. Or, I don't know, let's just grab like Arial or something. We'll just grab a simple font. Arial Regular. Very fancy. It's kind of a nice clean font. And then we will, let's see, we got that set up, and click on New Text. And we'll just start off with a 12, hit Enter, and get our number in there. And our font's not matching. If anybody wants to figure out a different font that we can use, I'm fine with that. It does not matter to me. But we want to go ahead and set up our numbers here, so we'll have to create, let's see, 11 more. So we can go ahead and do that. The basic stuff, thank you. No problem, man. Does that mean you'll also do a Smash stream one day if you give what the people ask for? Maybe. We'll see. Alright, let's do a 1. Let's do a 2. Oh boy, this is so much fun. You can also import SVG files with this from Illustrator, which is pretty dope. So if you got some like cool logo that you have, you can import it in here and set it up. Whoops, edit text, not what I meant. And 11, okay. So from here we got a bunch of numbers. Oh boy, that's a lot of fun. So I could scale these down one at a time. That sounds really inefficient though. So instead what I'm going to do is hide everything except for my numbers and my clock face. You know what? Nah, never mind. I'll just hide I'll keep everything visible. I'm going to go into Transpose Master, T-Pose Mesh, take all my geometry, put it into one subtool, and now, through the magic of selections here, we can select all of our numbers, and accidentally select our clock, and then we can mask off all those numbers, inverse our selection, and start scaling these down. So now they'll all be at the exact same size when I import this in here. In the Text 3D tool, there are some options for working with the extrusion of those. I'm not sure if by default you can. Extrusion is just how deep the numbers are. I don't think there's anything that allows you to actually control the size that they insert at. If there is, oops, we did it this way anyway. Alright, so let's go ahead and just get these into place real quick. Does that look about the correct size? I'm gonna say that that's good. So let's get out of our transpose here. So that'll go back through, scale all of our numbers down. Oh boy, so much fun. And then if you guys remember the crease function that we used earlier, down here we're going to use it again. Because if we look at the geometry here, it's got this kind of stair-stepping. This is just because the geometry is not a high enough resolution. So if I smooth that out, that doesn't look very good. We want to fix that. So if we click Crease by default, it should crease all the 90-degree edges that we have here. So it's done a pretty good job of smoothing that. So I'm just going to press the down arrow key and then crease. down arrow key, crease, down arrow key, crease, so I can step through all of these and just crease them up really quick. And let's just, you know, run a quick D key to smooth those out, make sure it's working out. Oh, we missed one hard edge up here, so we'll just manually crease that, crease edge. There we go. See if there's any more that we missed. The 6 looks good, 5 looks good, 4, oh, got one there that's kind of got missed, it's okay. 3 looks good, and the 2 looks good. All right, I think that's all of them. So now we can go ahead and get these into place. Now we could use the transpose, rotate, and then like rotate them back by snapping and setting up our specific number of degrees. That's gonna take a while, so instead of doing that, I think we'll just manually set these into place. Oh, you know what? We should probably get these actually touching our clock face. That would probably be smart, wouldn't it? Let's go back to transpose. And if you're having some trouble, you can't activate transpose to see through the object here. So let's instead, what we'll do is take this geometry and we will hide that outer edge. Or actually, we'll hide that outer edge, and then what I'm going to do is control click and drag with my transpose line, and then press Control W. So, whoop, there we go. Hold on, invert, Control W. I want this interface to be polygrouped. So now I can just select that and line it up. Let's see. Gotta say, even though I shouldn't be, I'm impressed with how clean the text is. ZBrush equals king. Yeah, it's, you know, it's a pretty good tool. And then it works with anything that you have installed on your machine from your font library. And as well as, like I said, you can import SVG vectors and such to play around with. So from here, let's go ahead and line up our jank. Let me just hide everything that we don't want. And, whoops. Line this up. I need to set that back to 4 because it's kind of messing with my ability to snap that to the 90-degree angle. I'm gonna make these a little bit more thick by using the move function and holding shift. So you can skew objects, but if you hold shift, you can kind of grow that, make it a little bit more deep. And I'm just gonna push them into the surface a little bit. Jagglebones, oh my god, that's such a good name. Not an everyday conversation for someone to be excited about numbers. Look, gotta get excited about these fun ZBrush tools. All right, so like I said, instead of going through and you know, being super specific, let's not like waste any time here. We'll just click and drag and put them where we want them. They're maybe a little bit too big actually now that we're putting some of these in here. You know what? This is gonna be so ununiform. I'm not gonna like it. All right, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it right, guys. No reason to take all this time making something and then have it look like butt, right? I want things to look good. I got a lot of extra geometry in here that I'm going to delete. These are just from the transposes that I have been doing. Alright, so what do we want? We had it set to 3 rotation steps. Is that correct? I can't remember now. Okay, so it is 3. So you'll notice, oh no, it's it's not perfectly straight up and down. What do? We should be able to snap to the center of that geometry, and then hold Shift again, whoops, to rotate along its central axis. And however many times we rotate that around, we'll just rotate it the same amount to get it back to where we wanted it. Pretty neat, pretty neat. All these transpose rotation tricks. This is why I like the transpose line. It's got all these secrets that people don't know about. Let's line that up a little bit better with that central point. And I will just take the time to rotate all of these first. And like I said, you could obviously do this with a texture map, but I'm playing around with a lot of cool stuff here, I think. I hope somebody thinks it's cool. Because I'm doing this because people ask for hard surface stuff. Oh no, come back. Alright, and then all we have to do, again, is snap to the middle, do a quick few rotations, let quick save do its thing, and we should be good to go with our numbers here. That doesn't look straight. Ah, so our 4 has some floating geometry off somewhere, and I know that because when I snap to the center, it's putting it out here in the middle of wherever. So what I'm going to do is Control-Shift-Click and select just my 4, and then go to Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. And it actually did it, so I know that now when I snap to the middle, it'll snap to the actual 4. I'm not sure why that was the case. And let's make sure that the 3 here doesn't have anything like that as well. So it's saying something has to be partially hidden to do this function, which means it does not have anything. Not sure why that happened on the 4. But that's okay. We got it figured out. Oh, the 6 has it as well. That's no good. Oh, by the way, when you are rotating with the Transpose tool and you hold Shift, if you go a full 180 degrees, it will not only flip the object along the axis that you're spinning, but it will mirror it as well, and that's very frustrating. So just so you know, for future reference, when you get to that point right before there, what you have to do is just let go of it and then do another rotation. It's a little dumb thing that happens from time to time. It looks like a few of these numbers have some secret geometry floating off in space. I'm not sure why that is the case, but it looks like the object is still watertight, so looks like only certain numbers as well. Could put in a guide circle. A guide circle. Well, we kind of have this snap with our thing here with our cylinder. So that's kind of our guide already. And there we go. We got all of our numbers aligned. Oh boy. Let's merge them all together. Merge down, always okay, sure. Cool. Now we can set up some quick different colors maybe if we want to do that for our clock face. So we could just very quickly MRGB. I'll just use my ZBrush paint because it's like the quickest one that you get some decently accurate colors from, just so we get a little bit more visual breakup between some of these objects. And then actually for our, let's do our clock hands as well. And for our clock, because this is the same geometry here, and because poly paint, the way that I'm applying this is vertex color, if we end up making our clock black, we can do that. But if we want to make our clock face white, just so you guys can see what's going on here, let's say we just want to make our clock and this, let's just say our clock face, right? So if we make this white and we turn that off, you'll see that you get some gradation between this area, and that's because there's not enough polygons to support the change that I'm making there with the transition between the poly paint. So poly paint is applied to vertices. So if I were to come in here and grab my paintbrush, I can't paint on the face, but I can paint on the vertex, just so you can see that occurring there. So it is vertex applied. So we can add in, if we just want to pre-visualize this with some geometry, we can add in another cylinder in here to make that work. Or what we can do is just grab our object here. Let's do an auto groups. So I have this and this. Now those are two separate pieces. And then what I can do is actually split them off. I can keep the clock face, and this is all just so it's, you know, pre-visualize with what we want. And then we can make the outside black, or, you know, a little bit of an off black, since that's really dark and hard to see. So that's like a quick way that you can do that without getting the vertex bleeding. And then if you want to combine those back together later, you can merge them back together and then run a weld points function. If I do this, let me quick save first. If I do this though, the vertices will start bleeding that color again, because remember, it's vertex color that's applied there. So just so you understand what's going on there, I wanted to show that off. And I can keep these combined as one piece of geometry so we can still work on it. But just understanding that these vertices are no longer welded is important, because if we want to extrude or slide or move anything around here, oh no, those aren't actually connected there. That's kind of important. All right, cool. Let's move on. Maybe we can do our little legs next or something. I'll just I'll make that color for now. Make sure we didn't miss any questions. Very nifty, says Noble Yad. Welcome back, man. How you doing? Scale time, that's right. Secret geometry, yes. All the ZBrush secrets are being revealed today in our hard surface tutorial. Did I say that? Did I make an accidental rhyme again? I do that all the time. I might have just done it again, actually. All right, before we continue on, I'm going to take a quick restroom break, and we can continue doing some hard surface stuff in ZBrush when I get back. But until then, everybody else get up, do some stretching, take 5 minutes, touch your toes if you can. I can't. Yeah, no blood clots. No blood clots allowed. All right, I'll be back in 5. All right, let's do some more hard surface stuff. I was thinking we could do the legs on the clock next. Should be pretty simple. I think the only thing that will be new in the process that we haven't shown thus far would be the creation of this kind of hard-edged shape of this cylinder. And that should be very, very easy to do. So let's start by creating one on a central axis. That'll make it a lot easier to see what's going on. So let me just change my material here, back to our modeling, our sculpting material, and let's just duplicate an object so that we can initialize it. Come down to initialize, 2, 1, 2, just keep those default settings, and then hit cylinder Y, that bottom option there. And let's make our leg. This should be pretty easy because by default that 212 cylinder already has, oh no, it has 8 sides. We want a 6-sided. It does have 8 sides. So we want a 6-sided shape. To do that, let's do this instead. And this will be new for some people, I think. So let's delete our cylinder. Before we had ZModeler, we had primitives in ZBrush. And this was how we created the shapes that we wanted. The primitive shapes that we wanted. You'd come up here, click this object, choose your primitive. So we'd grab a cylinder 3D. And then we would come down into the initialize palette. And there's all these options down here. There's just a ton of different stuff. So we're gonna mess with these sliders until we get what we want. So vertical divide, I think we can bring that all the way down. That looks good. And then for the horizontal divide, we'll just slide that down until we get a 6-sided shape. I believe that is a 6-sided. We probably could have gotten away with 8, but I think it's cool to look at this stuff too, just so you guys can see. And then there's some other sliders in here that you can mess with if you want to play with the scale, squash, stretch, or in the Z-axis there. We can do that manually by ourselves. There are a few other things in here if you want to like taper the shape or adjust the subdivision level of the cap. We don't want to do that though. But yeah, we can go ahead and take this now, and we want to click on Make Polymesh 3D. So this is now actually geometry. Before we would not be able to append or use that at all. Now we can. So we can go back to our clock face here, click on Append, and choose that PM 3D cylinder that we just created. We take our cylinder, and it looks like he's ginormous. That's okay. We will now scale this down. What's going on, Sixit? How you doing, man? We're looking at some hard surface stuff today. Getting lots of stuff done. Trying to explain as much as I can, like every single step of the process. Alright, so we got this basic shape here for our leg. You know what, the more I'm looking at that, the more it looks like an 8-sided cylinder. It looks like it's got more subdivs vertically. But that's okay. Let's just use what we got so that I can show you how you might want to do something like this. So from here, what we can do is now append another cylinder, this time one that we're going to smooth out, unlike this one, to the bottom here. And you could split this point and extrude it yourself. I would avoid that because anytime you're going from a hard surface edge to something that's a little bit more organic or anything that's tight to anything that's soft, you end up getting a point where that needs to transition geometrically, and that is a point that we can create a lot better transition between those if we have two separate objects, two separate pieces of geometry. And I'll show you what I mean here in just a moment. If my rambling there didn't make much sense. All right, so we'll pull this out. We can maybe scale this up a bit. And it looks like this pulls down and tapers. Whoops, move. Mask off that one side there. and just start tapering that down. Alright, I'm going to run an auto groups function on this to get 2 different poly groups. If you don't know how to do that, that is down in your polygroup menu, auto groups. And then I'm going to split these up into 2 separate subtools here. Just work on these. And get that to line up a little bit better. All right. So there we go. That's how I would do that. We also need to get our end cap, but let me show you why you don't want to do it the other way. So for instance, I'll just insert a poly loop on this object here. Very strange. I'm not sure why that's not working. Let me just do a slice for a poly loop. So essentially what we're dealing with here is we're having a creased edge going into an area where it's not creased. So what ends up happening is you have a pinched area or a pinched piece of geometry that leads into a, more of a smoothed edge. And you end up always getting some kind of transition there. And that doesn't look super great. So to get around that, we have made these 2 separate objects so that we don't have that issue. So now we can keep the top piece hard and solid, and then we can, smooth and subdivide this as much as we want without fear of that breaking down. Now for our central piece on the clock to create that little round cap, we ended up using a cylinder and then creating like the beveled shape there. You don't have to do that. I was just saving on poly count that way. If you want to be, a little bit faster, you could insert a sphere or a half sphere and work that way. Just because that adds needless polygons though, I think I'm going to do it the exact same way that I did before. If anything, we could even copy and duplicate that central piece and slide it down here. But this shouldn't be too hard. We can just do a quick little extrusion. Pull that out. And add in a few quick poly loops that we can increase in scale. And again, if I do anything too fast during this process, please, or if I don't explain it well enough, please just let me know. Let's also get rid of the creases on this top edge up here. Alt-clicking to remove creases. Slide this out. What I really like about the dynamic subdivs is that you can smooth an object and then you can create your selection, smooth it, and then move your geometry to see what that looks like. It's a nice quick way to do that kind of stuff. I like it a lot. Alright, let's try rounding this out a little bit more. And it doesn't need to be perfect. It looks like maybe there's a little bit of like a tight separation in between the sphere and the end cap here, so if you want to do something a little bit more visually interesting, what we can do is select this edge, hover over it with the ZModeler brush, hold space, bevel, edge loop complete, and then click and drag. And that'll give us a nice little split there. And then what we can do is run an extrude poly loop and click and push that edge loop in. And that will be rounded there, of course, but we also always have that option if we want to crease our edges. So we can zoom in here and do a couple creases, see what that looks like. Yeah, I like that a lot more. Okay, cool. So let's crease up a few more edges and see what that looks like. Beautiful. So now we got like that little separation point there. So you can play with this, you know. I think this is fine for what we want here for our purposes, but we could sit here and adjust this all day if we wanted to get this, you know, absolutely perfect. I think I'm maybe just gonna scale this in a little bit more, try to help round out that shape a little bit better. Be a little bit more accurate to what I'm seeing in our image. Alright, that looks good enough, I think. Let's see. Ghost of Christmas Future, what is going on, man? How are you doing? Welcome back. Alright. So now, this little six-sided shape, I'm glad we looked at how to do this, but I think I'm going to delete it and put in an eight-sided. I thought that was a six-sided, but the more I'm looking at it, it feels like these, there's not enough subdivisions here. So, we could duplicate this and insert our cylinder that we had previously right on top. Alright, that feels a lot closer in terms of vertical subdivision levels. And I think this could maybe be longer, or, you know, essentially making it look more narrow by doing this, and probably taper a bit more. So we're visually closer to what we're seeing there. Maybe that could be a little bit longer. Like I said, we can sit here and play with this stuff all day, but we don't need to. Just want to try to get this close. Alright, let's move this into place for our leg. Sorry, I got a little extra piece of geo up here. Delete that. And I think what I'm going to do here is use the same trick that we used before with our transpose rotation to get these to be aligned with our clock a little bit better. So I'll just slide that up into the clock face a little bit. We will slide that back, and obviously we need to scale this down to make that fit. And in relation, scale-wise, how's that look, guys? Maybe like a little bit smaller. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. Alright. Let's grab our clock, let's snap to that central vert, and now, when we rotate this object, we can rotate along this clock perfectly. So maybe we can go and line up with like the 7 or the 5 there, something like that, or maybe, yeah, we'll say the 7, sure. And then instead of duplicating this and doing it again, we can just run a mirror across here. So instead of doing a mirror, what we will do is a mirror and weld. Modify topology, mirror and weld. And then what I'll do is just take this top piece of geo, split these off, smooth those, and voila, we got our two legs. And now we can maybe change the angle there and adjust some of that as well. It does look like there's also like a little connective area there between the actual metal object and the clock, the plastic of the clock, or whatever material this is. So we can do that next. Let's duplicate our little cylinders here. And I'll turn on symmetry while I do this so it stays even. We could do this one at a time and then mirror it. It really doesn't matter. What I'm going to do is turn on local symmetry so that when I scale this, it will not fly off screen. So I'm just going to smooth that out, scale it up a little bit, and then snap to that vert so that I can slide uniformly there. Alright, it does seem a bit on the tight side, so if we want to move these back, we could do that. I think we'll wait to do that and just kind of leave them there. We got them, you know, I think there's maybe like a little bit of an angle to those as well. Looks like the legs are sticking forward maybe a little bit. We can do that once we, you know, get the rest of these in. I don't want to lean the clock back. It looks like it's leaning back, visually, from what I can tell at least. I don't want to lean it back until we get the rest of the parts and pieces in there, so we can do that next, and then that'll probably be one of the last things that we do. If I were to lean that back, it would have been really hard for me to rotate those numbers into place, but because this is facing our x-axis and it is flat, it makes that a lot easier. Alright, so let's do these little guys up here, like the bell and hammer and the connective piece up here. That'll be an interesting piece. So let's see. How do we want to do this? I think I'm gonna grab the geometry that I have down here and duplicate it, and then rotate. Oh, whoops. I wanted to rotate these all the way up here. And then we could do like the little hammers up there or whatever. It's kind of hard to see. I think I'm going to slide this edge back, this edge loop here. I think we need a little bit more room. Alright, now I could start building this shape out this way, but that poses some unique problems. Much like if I rotated the clock back, working at that specific angle would make it hard to put the numbers and the dots into the dashes and everything in the correct location. Similarly, working at an angle makes it hard to poly model stuff and keep it you know, uniform and all facing the right direction. So to avoid that, I think I'm just going to work on one of these at a time on the central x-axis. So I'll take this top piece here, and I'll create this vertically, just kind of going up, and then after we're done doing that, then we can rotate it into place. I think that's often a lot easier. There are ways that you can do it do it without you know, working on the x-axis or on a specific axis, but you know, it's easier to do it this way, so you don't want to make it harder on yourself unnecessarily, or at least I wouldn't. Okay, so let's just hide everything except for what we're working on and get that little bell shape next. So to create this, I'll show another cool little trick. I'm full of them. Alright, let's grab let's just do a polysphere. This should hopefully insert on here properly. Let's click and drag that out. And then, let's see here. Alright, so we got our sphere, and we have our cylinder there. I'm going to delete the bottom half of my sphere. So, and I'll also turn on double. Slide that down. And then I'll snap to this central middle point so that when I scale this out, it scales concentrically around that cylinder. Alright, so if I smooth that out, we can get an idea of what that shape is looking like. It looks like there's some warble there. Looks like it's not perfectly flat. That's okay. We will, I believe that it is perfectly flat. I believe so. I think it's more so just the geometry that's causing some issues there. Once we do what we're about to do, it will not matter. What we want to focus on first is getting the shape that we see here. So it's a little bit more flat on top. So I'm just going to mask off that top area and then pull this down and start getting that to be a little bit more flat up there. You know what? I think using the polysphere might have been a bad idea. So I think we're going to delete our polysphere and instead try using our either our insert sphere or either our point sphere or our sphere 32. The reason I want to use these instead of the polysphere is because these aren't perfectly symmetrical all the way around, and the geometry has a little bit of a boxy quality to it when you smooth out. Whereas with this sphere, it's all cylindrical, but you do get this like really tight vertice at the top that's like meeting with all this geometry. So what we could do instead, we could work with this, or we could go back to that old trick of creating a sphere 3D here, and then come on down to initialize and say, yeah, we don't need all those horizontal subdivisions, we only need like 6 or 8 of them. So we could do 8 of those, and for the vertical, we could do a lot less, maybe like 8 of these or so. And could even start to squash this now. I don't think that's super necessary, but we can go ahead and do a little bit of that. And then we can make that a polymesh 3D and delete the bottom half of it. This will be a lot better than that other piece of geometry. So to put this where I want, instead of appending it, what I'm going to do is go up to the brush menu and click Create Insert Mesh, and click New. And then we'll go back to our object here, and I should have that brush that I just created selected, but if not, click on your brushes and choose that newest brush, and then we'll just click and drag that out right where we want it. It's as easy as that. Easy as pie. And now we have a new piece of geometry in town that we can work with, and it is misaligned somehow. I'm not sure how that happened. Let's delete that, and I'll just reinsert it on top of this cylinder, just to make sure that it's perfectly where I want it. So brush, on the point there, click, drag, hold shift. There we go. And now we can scale this up and get this right where we want. Alright, let's try to match that shape a little bit more closely. From what I can tell, we probably want to scale in here. Slide that down. Gets a little flat on top. It's already looking pretty close. Let's scale out here. And let's grab that bottom edge again and slide that down. Something like that. I think that looks pretty close. Let's just make sure that proportionally we're looking pretty good. So this either needs to get more narrow, or this just needs to get larger, or some combination of the two. Oops. All right. Well, I think we almost got it. The last thing that I want to do to this actual shape here, though, is I want to give it some thickness, because right now it's just a, one-sided polygonal shape, which is not something that we want. We want this to actually have some thickness. Let me quick save. We'll grab our ZModeler brush again, that hard surface brush that we've been playing with so often during our lecture today. I feel like I'm a teacher. All right, let's hold the space bar over a polygon. Extrude all polygons this time. So we will click and drag in, and we will start to get a little bit of thickness there. Now the problem is, if you work the way that I do, and you always have double turned on for your display properties, and that's great, I like to keep that on all the time. That allows you to see the inside of your polygons. But what happens is, when you extrude in on an object, it will often flip your normals. And if you don't know what that means, that's okay, but just come down to your display properties, turn off double, and if your geometry looks weird, if it's facing the wrong way, just click on flip, and you should be all good. Should be set to move forward from there. The last thing I want to do on this shape is actually just set up a quick few crease edge loops. And I think that looks pretty good. Of our teacher. Just call me Teach. I expect everyone to have an apple on my desk tomorrow morning. Is there an apple emoji? All right. So next, let's insert a little nut there. I believe that's a nut, right? So we'll do a nut. And I believe nuts are 6-sided. They are hexes, right? You gotta be careful Googling nut. I guess we could just look at a nut, right? That is a hex. I think most on average are 6-sided. Oh, there we go. So this little shape here, this like beveled edge that turns into the hard edge, that's pretty tough to do. Here's actually a 3D example of how you could set something like that up. I think we're not going to do that. It might take a little bit too long to poly model that. We could maybe look at doing that, but let's just go ahead and start off here by getting that hex shape first. I know I have one here somewhere, so we can duplicate and steal something that we made earlier. Always try to repurpose stuff if you can. So I have this little piece of geometry here, and oh no, it's not, it's not straight. It's not exactly the way I need it to be facing. So there's a little trick here that you can do if you want to get something, perfectly aligned with an axis again. If you have your transpose selected, your transpose line, you can snap to a surface, and then if you start rotating and holding the shift key, it should allow you to snap back to the vertical axis. And it doesn't matter what angle that's at, as long as you can snap to a flat and hold shift, it should be able to snap back to the vertical there. Now the problem with this is that, if I'm going to align this, I'll have to manually align it so that I can get that where I want. Or we can do what we did before where I just, very quickly made a quick create insert brush new, and then we can just delete that geo. We don't even need them anymore, goodbye. And then we can insert directly on top of this vertice. Now we could repurpose this, but it has 8 sides instead of 6, so that is not what we want. And that is not facing the right way, but that's okay. I don't mind. This phone keyboard ruins every joke you make. Nice. I got the gist of what you were saying. You good. Ooh, and an apple. Thank you, Seagull. Appreciate it, man. They're all six-sided? Wow. I imagine a world where there must be at least one with not six sides, without six sides. Let's look at how we could do that, like, quick like little rounded beveled area into the hard sharp area. Just so you could see how I would do it, I would just split this edge, get that pretty close to the outside. Then we could extrude up a little bit, I think. And I don't know if this is exactly going to work, but we want to crease these individual edges, like so. And then probably just delete this edge loop. Let's see. Yeah, something like that. And then could hollow this out as well. To get this to be the same on the bottom, I'll show you guys a little trick here. If you turn on local symmetry, go into transform, sim, Y, and then run a mirror and weld function. This must be facing the wrong way. Let's turn on our Z symmetry. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This symmetry doesn't matter. On your mirror and weld button, I'm pulling this up in my hotkey menu, there's actually a little tick that you can make there. And then we can mirror and weld that, and that'll be exactly the same on the bottom and top. That is, again, down in Modify Topology, Mirror and Weld. And then I will turn that back off. And then very quickly, we can hollow this out as well by splitting our edge here. Let me just make sure I quick save. Doesn't have to be accurate to real world proportions, it's fine. And we will Q-mesh out these inner pieces of geometry here. And voila, we have a quick little nut there. Nothing fancy, just quick, which is exactly what we want. All right, let's see. It looks like maybe there's a little end cap or something up here. Instead of making more pieces of geometry, separate objects, I will just very quickly extrude a poly loop and pull that out a little bit. And of course, we want to make sure that these are creased. So I've been showing you guys like a lot of individual functions here in ZBrush using the ZModeler tool, but just in general for some tips when you are making stuff in hard surface. A quick little tip that I learned a while ago that, you know, helped bring hard surface stuff to a little bit of the next level for me as I'm making more and more complex shapes is beveling. If you bevel bevel like crazy, bevel every edge you possibly can. I'm not even kidding. It adds just like a little bit of extra finish, I guess, is what I would call it. And it helps your edges read a little bit better. That's unfortunate. I cannot actually bevel that. It's gonna break on me. So let me cheat real quick. Alright, so bevels make things just a little bit more visually complex. They also help you to be able to read what's going on in your surface. I think I've shown this off on stream multiple times, but just so we can get it in here in the hard surface tutorial for those that will be watching this later on YouTube as well. Just from a distance read, just having that extra little transition there helps make things more readable. What I would recommend doing is create two different objects, bevel one and don't bevel the other. Zoom out a little bit and see if you can kind of pick up on the visual difference there. Let's go ahead and bevel this guy as well. I'll probably do this to a few things here. After you bevel though, you do want to, if you want that hard edge, you can go back through and re-crease up everything. That looks nice and tight. At least the indented ones are six-sided, but there are many kinds. There are many nuts, but this one is mine. There are manufacturers that make weird, like proprietary screws, like on the old, I don't know if it's on the current iPhone, but like the old iPhones, they used to have this like, I don't know, 2mm like star-shaped screw, and you had to buy their screwdriver if you wanted to unscrew your iPhone. It was stupid. What's going on, Kuka Milk? How you doing, man? I miss you. I miss you too, Kukin. Kooky boy. Yeah, kook. Alright, let's see how our clock's shaping up. Let's check out scale here for this shape that we've just created. And then we can maybe get this into posiciones for where we want this to live. It actually looks pretty close in terms of proportions. I think there are some few tweaks here and there that we can make real quick to get this a lot closer. Let's go back into transpose. We've looked at transpose multiple times, so this shouldn't be anything new for you if you've been following along. And then I'm just gonna make this shorter. We're just gonna bring this down. Now, unfortunately, you can't see any of your creases or smooth groups that you set up in Transpose Master, so you might have to pop back and forth between those two a couple times before you get exactly what you're looking for. I won't believe it, but you're working on redoing the entire hair for the character that you're working on. Nice. Got the beveling, writing that down. Just bevel everything. It's the secret, guys. And you're getting ready for Bully Saturday. That's right. Thank you for reminding me. If you guys are interested in getting some stuff critiqued live on stream here, we are doing critiques on Saturday. If you guys want to get in on that, just type in !critique into chat, and you guys can find the instructions on how to do all that. I think I'm gonna make the outside of our clock here a little bit darker. So it's I just didn't want to make it so dark that it was impossible to see what was going on. Oh, you know what? I chose the wrong material there. We will make that work. And obviously we're just, kind of pre-vising this in ZBrush, just so we can get some like quick color separations between some of this stuff. And it helps visually for us to figure out what's going on. Just apply a few of these colors here and there. And voila. Voila! Let's move that back, I think, a little bit. And make this shorter. So I really do think that's pretty much everything in terms of, really a lot of different functions and showing off just about everything I can. Pretty much from here, moving forward, a lot of what we will be doing and looking at I think the only thing that is left that you guys probably, if you've never used any of this stuff before and you're just following along, I think you would have an easy time creating like the little hammer. It's just a couple cylinders, right? This shape, though, is the only thing that I think might be a little bit more complicated. So I think we'll do that next, and then we can maybe quickly do a hammer time. Let me make this a little bit larger. This feels like it could be a little bit bigger. I think even larger than that. No, it is Saturday. The critiques are on Saturday, not Sunday. You get bullied every day. It's the exact same. The size of the bell looks precious. Yeah, that's why we made him a little bit larger. Once we get it into position, it'll be, I think, a little bit easier to tell on proportions. Might have made it a little bit too big. I can't. It's kind of hard to tell right now. Becker, what's going on, man? Welcome back. Never had as much fun sculpting like today. Did 2 freehand, and it was something cathartic. Not good, but very fun. Yeah, man, sculpting is a ton of fun. I love me some sculpting. That's why I do it. All right, let's move everything and get it into position. And I think I'm just gonna combine everything on the bell so we can stop going into transpose mode. We don't need to keep doing that. And then we can do our mirror and weld and get that set up and maybe move these back so that they're not like mechanically. I can't imagine that they would be connected to that part of the clock. I think the same thing about our legs as well. I'm actually going to set up some creases down here so that I can combine these. Let me make sure I got Sim on. Because it's making it very annoying to keep these separated. And if I just combine them, it'll make this easier to deal with. Let's do some subtool cleanup real fast. So I think, I can only imagine that these are connected back here, right? I feel like it's really hard to see. But they gotta be connected to something with some actual, like the actual base. This is really thin. There's no way that they're connected there. At least from what I can tell visually. Doesn't make much sense. If you want this to snap directly to that surface, a little bit more accurately, you could do what we did before and make an IMM brush. I'm just quickly, rotating these into place. You can, there's a lot of different ways to do this, but just so we can kind of do this quick and get them into position without worrying too much about accuracy down here. It's not that big of a deal. And this is going to be leaning back as well. Let's say like there maybe. And the way I did that, by the way, is if you start to rotate, hold the shift key, hold shift, and then let go of shift, and you can tilt your camera. Another ZBrush secret for you guys. And if I wanted to, you know, line this up, I could put in a ground plane or something like that. We'll just leave it like that for now. And then our little bell boys. Get our bell boys as well. I think I'm going to make these a little less like spot on where that 5 is. I'm gonna do the same thing up here. I don't want them to be, I don't want them to feel like unnaturally symmetrical. Like, oh, they're perfectly aligned with the 7 and 5. Same up here. These are like perfectly aligned with the 1 and 11. So let's like offset them just a tad. And cool, let's quick save that. And just make sure we don't break anything from here. Who's hungry? Gonna get some pizza if anybody wants some. Oh man, pizza sounds delish. I would love some pizza. I will take a slice. Please and thank you. Alright, let's figure out where we want this. But I like weird flavored pizza. I like that pineapple pizza. I'm about that pineapple life. I think maybe this shape could just be like a little bit less round. Now that we're starting to put some of this other stuff in here, feels like we overdid this beveled shape, whatever you want to call it. Can't tell if that was masked or not. Pizza tastes like Illuminati. Illuminati created pizza. I mean, they're triangles, they have to be. An alligator pizza? What the hell is an alligator pizza? Like actual alligator meat? I've never had alligator. I don't think I have. Had swordfish. That's like the most exotic sea creature I think I've eaten. Or squid. Squid's pretty good. Like calamari, fried squid tentacles. Heathen, look, don't knock it till you try it like 20 times. It's an acquired taste. Makes it too juicy? I don't know. Maybe I like juicy pizza. Alright. So I don't know if I should like angle these or not. We'll just kind of leave them where they are for now. And then let's create this shape that I said is probably the more complicated of the crew here. Kevin in Canada, thank you for the follow and welcome to the stream. How you doing? How you doing, brother? Brother. All right. So how are we gonna do this? Probably start with our good buddy, the cube. And I am just going to manually align this into position and start squashing, stretching, all that good stuff that we already have learned how to do today. And I'm just gonna align this by eye. And then what I'm going to do is start extruding the geometry into the basic shape that I want. You could also do this with a curve brush, but you're going to be able to get a little bit more accurate results by just kind of poly modeling this with something like your ZModeler brush, which is what we've been looking at this whole time. So we know how to use extrusion functions, so that's probably where we're going to start. And you can do this however you want. I typically like to get a few extrusions going, and then I will, from there start masking, doing some rotation, and starting to just shape this up into what I'm seeing in the reference image there. But I like to do a few extrusions at once, just so I can do multiple things at once here. Makes it a little bit faster, I think. And then the D key, just to see how that's kind of like smoothing out there. And I want to just get, I don't want this to be proportionally correct right now. I just want to get the basic shape down, and then we will focus on proportions. But what you can do is once you cross the x-axis, we're in the safe zone where we can now run a mirror and weld function and get that to mirror across to the other side. And then we can start working with X symmetry. Let me delete this middle edge loop just so that's nice and flat. And then we can set up our creases as well. And then from here, it's just a bunch of manipulation until we get closer to the shape that we're looking for. But we're already pretty close. Z-spheres? What you talking about? We're not using Z-spheres, not today. The curve helper. The curve helper. I don't know if I'm actually familiar with the curve helper. You could create a curve and also smooth out the curve. Why not a sphere? Why not a sphere for this shape? Because it's flat. It looks to be flat to me, from what I can tell. That went better than expected. Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very quick and easy process. I'm reptiles, dude. Illuminati? The Illuminati? Yes, can we please call the Illuminati the Illuminati from now on? The Illuminati are coming to get you. Yes. Alright, and then for this part up here, I am going to create like a little cylindrical piece for that to connect to. We're going to do it the same as what we did on the clock hands down below. So, how we did that, if you didn't see, let me just take this geometry here and insert a poly loop. Whoop. Come on. Said insert a poly loop, dang it. There we go. Alright, and then there's a function in here called move infinite radius that allows you to click and move that poly loop wherever you want. You can make your object dance. Yay, fun. If you hold shift though, it'll slide along that object perfectly, which is what we want for now. So I'll just click and drag that up there. Doesn't have to be perfect, I just want it to be close. And then we're gonna use that extrude poly loop function, much like we used earlier. Just extrude and pull that out to the basic shape that I need. Get all that there. Voila, we have done it. We have created what we needed. And I can maybe make this like a little bit more thin or something to get that to fit within there. Cool, cool, cool. Let's continue to shape this up and probably make this more narrow. And I don't have subdivisions on anything in this. This is all just done with dynamic smooth. So all this is, you know, even this object, this is just dynamic smooth. Hit the D key once, and I got my dynamic subdivs on. I think I have that set to 6 or 5 on that object, so it looks even more smooth than a lot of these other things where you can see the tessellation of the geometry there. So we could increase that maybe as well. It's a little hard to see on some of these objects just because of the dark color. That's okay. All right. Well, other than just like sitting here manipulating this shape, I think we're pretty close. Maybe stand to move some verts around for a little bit. You can play with this as much as you want. It looks like maybe this is a little bit more thin up there. Starts to curve in a little bit faster than what I have. But we don't, we're not super concerned about accuracy. I'm just showing how we would make something like this. Kind of looks like a Mickey Mouse clock now that I'm looking at it. Alright, let's do the little hammer, which should be super simple, and we can call this cat done. I'm missing like a couple things in here, like the connective piece for the bell and making that look like it would actually go in there. Actually, there is one more thing that I will show you guys here with that. After the hammer. Hammer time. It's a little tough to, some of these colors are kind of messing with me, so I'm just going to turn off the poly paint. It's a little bright. Alright, same thing that we've been doing. Initialize, grab a cylinder. Make sure that we crease that cylinder. Whoop, our crease needs to be set to 45, not 1. You know who else is juicy? Bob Ross, looking with that hair emoji that you just put. Seagulls can blush. Who knew? Alright. Let's get this really thin. Whoops. And then the little hammer. Little hammerhead. That should be easy. Just rotate. Pull that up. Whoops. Scale up. Shrink in. Beautiful. And we can maybe try beveling these edges. See, ZBrush has a tough time trying to figure out what you're trying to do there sometimes with if you don't have like an edge loop that's close enough out there. So if I add an edge loop here and then try beveling that edge, see how it kind of figures out what's going on, what I want it to do now. It's just how it works. So I could bevel and crease those up. It looks like maybe there is a weird little raised up piece in the middle that we could extrude out. All stuff that we've looked at before though. Just extrusions, creases, bevels. That's pretty much what this whole guy is. The question is, can it hit it? Cannot. Alright, let's raise it up a little bit more. I think maybe if anything the perspective there is playing some tricks on us. We could maybe pull these in just to make sure that this is all, physically going to work. like I said, we're not going for crazy accuracy here. And of course we would need to do some stuff to like make that connect in there. All right, so let me show you guys how we can make some of this stuff physically make a little bit more sense. Since there's one other, one last thing I said I wanted to show you guys for this. And it involves live booleans. We're talking about all this hard surface modeling, we might as well look at some live boolean stuff as well. In pure Bob Ross style. Bob Ross doesn't like juicy things. I feel like Bob Ross would have liked juicy things. Alright, so I want to use some live booleans here, but I know that I'm going to have some trouble using live booleans on this piece of geometry because it is not watertight. Watertight geometry works best with live booleans. We'll see if this works, but I have a feeling we might get some visual bugs. We'll see how it goes. So let's go ahead and duplicate our clock. Let's grab a cube, our best friend the cube again, and I'm just going to move it up near that hammer that we just created. And let's hide that so that we can see where we are. Alright, so if you're not familiar with live booleans, they're pretty cool, pretty easy to work with. Essentially, if you're not familiar with a boolean is just the ability to add or subtract or create the difference between two objects. Those are the three options that we have in ZBrush, at least. We are going to be using the subtractive boolean. Live booleans are pretty new to ZBrush. Before live booleans, we had to kind of guess what we were going to do and then just dynamesh stuff out of an object. But now you can pre-visualize it, and I'll show you how you can do that in just a minute. Let's go ahead and insert some new poly loops in here. And then I'm going to crease this shape. And I'm going to crease it in such a way so that these edges are rounded. Mirror that back over to the other side, and everything else is creased. And then I'm going to put that object underneath my clock face. Whatever you want to subtract from an object, you have to have the positive object on top of the subtool list and the negative underneath that. Then you click that little negative icon and you turn on live boolean. And you can see how that is subtracting from our geometry there. So I can take this object and I can move this, slide it down, and you can kind of see what's happening there to get an idea. The way I've done this though, I've created some additional edge loops. So let me toggle off live boolean, and I'm just going to, there are ways that you can make this match the curve a little bit more accurately. Actually, you can make it match the curve perfectly, but I don't want to. We could maybe look at that later. Instead, let's just kind of move these verts around and kind of eyeball it. That's what we've been doing with this whole thing, so why stop now, right? And then I'll just rotate that out, make sure that we're getting a nice shape here. Alright, so this should subtract a little bit nicer. I'll also turn these off just so I can, and that, turn off all the things. I will also make this a little bit higher on this one side here, just so this feels like it's subtracting a little bit more uniformly. Let's turn live boolean back on just to see how that's looking, and then I can slide this shape down, And we can start getting an idea, blah, 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 of what that looks like. And the live booleans actually worked with this object, even though it's not completely watertight, so I'm glad that worked out. But yeah, that's a way that we can start creating some better interactions between some of these shapes. So if you've never played around with live booleans before, go ahead and give it a shot. It's a lot of fun. A lot of cool stuff that you can do with them. Alright, I think maybe we can look at doing a few more live booleans. Make sure that people don't have any questions here. You and your whole family watched anime on New Year's Eve. That is pretty funny. While smoking hookah and drinking coffee. Now that is a New Year's Eve party, if ever I heard one. Dang. I've not smoked hookah in a very, very long time. You didn't like it that much? I don't like it that much either. Whiskey and craft beer is king. Knows what he's talking about. When you are using live booleans, though, you have to make the material that you're subtracting the same as you're subtracting from, or else it will end up visually different. And maybe we could adjust that shape even more. I think we get the idea here. Let's maybe do a little bit to the portion up here. I am going to insert a creased cylinder. Actually, no, I don't need to do this. It'd be easier if I just reused this. Ugh. It's fine. We'll make this shape work. Oh no. At some point this got skewed and it is no longer straight. It kind of sucks. Alright, I'll do what I was going to do before. Oh, I knew it was coming. I could feel it. Alright. Let's like pull this shape up. Kinda hard to see with this big fat bell in the way. Live booleans tend to break a little bit when you are, or polyframe data tends to break a little bit when you are using live booleans. Alright, there we go. Just kind of fixing a couple things there real quick. Alright. So let's scale this puppy up. Maybe just do some quick manual rotations. Make it look like this is something that's maybe interacting with the actual surface. And I'm just kind of rotating this by hand. You could grab a brush and insert a cylinder directly on the surface if you wanted it to match the curve more accurately. But for something quick, this will work just fine. And then what I wanted to do with that was, we could even set up some like metallic materials here in ZBrush. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the materials in ZBrush, but if you wanted to like pre-viz some of this, there are a variety of different things that you can play around with. Like if you wanted to make that more metallic gold or something, I'll use it for the little rings here that I'm creating. And then essentially I was going to live boolean out some of this. I think that might take a little bit more time than I was hoping. Here, I'll show you a quick way to do it. You can duplicate that, and then I can... Oh, I don't even need to Q mesh this actually now. I can just use this, set it to negative. Extrude our polygonal faces. And use just this geometry as a negative to boolean out what we don't want. Now I'm not sure why that is skewing there. This should absolutely not be skewing. There we go. Alright, so that is actually affecting the stuff above it in the chain, so it's affecting that as well. So to get that to not happen, we just have to take our little bell here and move it down a little bit underneath that. And voila. Now we can do that to the other side just with a quick mirror and weld. And there you go. Wham bam slam. And you know, we could sit here and do a bunch more live booleans and all sorts of good stuff here. But that is how we use the ZModeler brush, how we do a lot of the hard surface modeling in ZBrush, all the poly modeling stuff that I pretty much do is with the ZModeler brush. Occasionally I use some other tools. If you guys want to check out more of that stuff, come and hang out on my next live stream. I pretty much use all these tools you know, all the time while I'm working on new characters. Let me open up the dude, my last dude, my Android. You guys can see a few examples. Where did I put you? Where is your render file? And I'll show it off here at the end since I'm guessing a lot of people didn't see this at the very beginning of our stream. Let me just set up the samples so we don't kill my machine while I'm streaming. Hopefully we don't drop any frames here. But this is the basic render setup that I made in Blender. I've shown this off a couple times, but I have now imported my Android 17 that I sculpted. A lot of this stuff was done with the techniques that we looked at today. The bag that he has on his waist, on his hip, the belt buckle, the socks, the shoes, his little patch on his shirt, even his hair was done with a lot of the techniques that we looked at today. And again, I'm just doing like 16 samples here so my computer doesn't explode while we're streaming. 11, 12, just a couple more. Come on, you can do it. Alright, so there's a quick little example of this render scene that I have set up here. I did some different render passes to this, so I didn't get this super strong backlight on the ground here with this line. I'm not a huge fan of that, so I did some stuff to get rid of that. But yes, for some, are you kidding me? I resized the window and you gotta recalculate your thing? Alright, but yeah, there are some more examples of some other hard surface stuff. It's also what we did yesterday. but I felt like we could have gone more in depth on a lot of the hard surface stuff. Oh my god, my words. We ended up doing a lot of physics sims in Blender though, as we played around with some different stuff. A lot of it was troubleshooting yesterday, but if you are coming in here a little bit late, all the stuff that we looked at today and yesterday will be up on my YouTube channel shortly. So if you missed anything, don't feel bad. It'll all be up on there in about, a day or so. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for today, unless anybody has any last-minute questions. Julie's Art, what's going on? How are you doing? You have not used Blender for rendering. Neither have I until a few days ago. Happy New Year to you guys as well. You're so glad I'm using Blender. I don't know a lot about Blender. Mainly just kind of set it up to do a quick render scene. And I really like a lot of the results that I've been getting out of it. It's really easy to set up a scene in here. I think I talked about this on Monday, New Year's Eve. That stream is up on my YouTube channel, so if you guys want to check that out, that's just YouTube/Follygon. Other than that, I don't see any other last-minute questions here, so I will shout out links down below for all the socials and whatnot. The one that I would really appreciate if you checked out or shared is just my Gumroad, gumroad.com/Follygon. If you are brand new to ZBrush digital sculpting and you guys want to learn more, I have a quick start course on here that's about a little over 2 hours. It includes my brushes, materials, a couple different meshes, one base mesh, some project-based homework, a lot of really good stuff. It is designed to get people up and running in ZBrush as quickly as possible. Got some more stuff on here for intermediate people, more advanced stuff as well as a host of base meshes, brushes, materials, my UI, a new tutorial and brush that I uploaded here recently for creating seams in ZBrush that I used to create the seams on my Android 17 character that I recently sculpted, as well as a bunch of other stuff. Again, I would really appreciate it if you checked it out. I don't pay anything to advertise, so it's just here on my stream that I mention it, and you awesome people sharing my stuff, which I always appreciate as well. But other than that, you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will hopefully see you tomorrow in our next stream at noon EST. And yeah, I stream every day except for Sunday, and I stream twice on Tuesdays. I also stream on the Pixelogic ZBrush channel at 6 p.m. EST. But yes, with that, again, you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.